I remember the smell of rain. On hot asphalt today, everything changed. It was late August, one of those humid afternoons where the air feels thick enough to chew, and the sky had just opened up after holding its breath all morning. I was standing outside the law office on Maple Street, watching water cascade off the green awning above me, pooling in the cracks of the sidewalk. My shoes were soaked through, my socks cold and uncomfortable, but I barely noticed. Inside that building, behind those tall glass doors with their brass handles, my mother's will was about to be read. My mother, who had been gone for 3 weeks, 2 days, and about 6 hours. Not that I was counting. The lobby smelled like old wood and lemon polish, the kind of scent that clings to expensive furniture and makes you feel like you should whisper. My sister Claire was already there, perched on the edge of a leather chair that was probably worth more than my car. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red and puffy, mascara smudged at the corners. She'd been crying again. Claire always cried more than me. People used to say she got Mom's sensitive heart, while I got Dad's practical mind. Dad, who had died when I was 12, leaving Mom to raise us alone. Or so I thought. The lawyer's name was Richard Pemberton, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled without a reason. Gray hair, gray suit, gray eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. His office was on the 3rd floor, and as Claire and I rode the elevator up together, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavy, loaded with grief and exhaustion, and something else I couldn't quite name. The elevator dinged softly, and the door slid open with a whisper. Pemberton's office was exactly what you'd expect, dark with paneling. Shelves lined with leather-bound books that probably hadn't been opened in decades, a massive desk that gleamed in the soft light of a green-shaded lamp. He gestured for us to sit, and we did, sinking into chairs that were somehow both comfortable and intimidating. Through the window behind him, I could see the rain still falling, streaking the glass, blurring the world outside into watercolor shades of gray and green. He cleared his throat, a dry sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room, and opened a manila folder. Mom's will. I could see her signature at the bottom of the first page, that familiar looping handwriting that used to appear on birthday cards and grocery lists and notes left on the kitchen counter. My chest tightened. Your mother was very thorough, Pemberton said, his voice measured and professional. She wanted to make sure everything was clear and that there would be no confusion about her wishes. He paused, glancing between Claire and me. Before we begin with the distribution of assets, there's a letter she asked me to read to you both. A personal letter. Claire reached for my hand, and I let her take it. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. I squeezed back, trying to offer comfort I didn't really feel. Pemberton pulled out a single sheet of paper, cream-colored and folded once. I recognized it immediately. Mom's stationery, the expensive kind she only used for important things. My stomach dropped. He unfolded it carefully, adjusted his reading glasses, and began. My dearest Claire and Jessica, if you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you this in person. I tried so many times over the years, but I was afraid. Afraid of losing you, afraid of hurting you, afraid of changing everything we had together. But you deserve the truth, and I can't leave this world without giving it to you. I felt Claire's grip tighten on my hand. Pemberton continued, his voice steady but somehow gentler now. Claire, you are my daughter in every way. I carried you. I brought you into this world, and I have loved you every single day since. But Jessica, my sweet Jessica, there's something you need to know. You came to us differently. When you were just 3 days old, we adopted you. Your father and I. We couldn't have more children after Claire, and we wanted so desperately to give her a sibling, to give ourselves another child to love. And then we found you, and you were perfect, and you became ours. The room tilted. Or maybe I tilted. I couldn't tell. The words echoed in my head, bouncing around like they were trying to find a place to land, but couldn't. Adopted. 3 days old. Not my mother's daughter. Not really. Not biologically. Not the way Claire was. I wanted to tell you so many times. The letter continued. When you were 5 and asked why you had brown eyes when Claire and I both had blue. When you were 10 and doing that family tree project for school. when you were 16 and so angry at me for reasons I couldn't understand. And I wondered if somehow you knew, if somehow you could feel that something was different. But I was a coward and I kept the secret. And now I'm leaving you with it. And I'm so sorry. My hand slipped out of Claire's. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. Couldn't feel much of anything except a strange numbness spreading through my chest like ice water. You are my daughter, Jessica. You will always be my daughter. Nothing about our love was a lie. But your biological mother, her name was Sarah Mitchell, and she was 17 when she had you. She wasn't ready to be a mother, and she made the brave choice to give you a chance at a better life. I have information about her, documents, everything I could keep for you in case you ever wanted to know. It's all in a box in my closet, in the blue hat box on the top shelf. The one I never let you look in, the blue hat box. I remembered it. Remember being 8 years old and curious, reaching for it during a game of hide and seek, and Mom appearing out of nowhere, her face pale, telling me firmly that it was private, that some things were just for grown-ups. I'd never thought about it again. Until now. I love you both more than words can say. The letter ended. Please don't let this change how you see each other or how you remember me. You are sisters in every way that matters. You are my daughters in every way that matters. And I hope, wherever I am now, that I'm with your father and that he's telling me I should have been braver. He probably is. He was always braver than me. All my love, forever and always, Mom. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, each second a small explosion in my ears. Could hear Claire breathing beside me, quick and shallow. Could hear the rain against the window, relentless and indifferent. Pemberton folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the folder, and looked at us with something that might have been sympathy. I know this is a shock, he said quietly. Your mother asked me to give you both time before we continue with the rest of the will. If you need to step out, take a break. That's perfectly understandable. I stood up. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, but they held me. I need air, I said, and my voice sounded strange, distant. Claire started to stand too, reaching for me, but I stepped back. I just need a minute. I walked out of that office, down the hallway, past the elevator, and into the stairwell. The door closed behind me with a heavy thud, and suddenly I was alone in the echoing concrete space, and the tears came, hot and fast and angry. I sank down onto the steps, my back against the cold wall, and let myself break apart. 29 years. 29 years of thinking. I knew who I was, where I came from, what my story was. And it was all a lie. Not a lie, maybe, but not the truth either. Some strange space in between where love and deception tangled together so tightly you couldn't separate them. I thought about every time Mom had looked at me with those blue eyes, so different from my brown ones. Every time someone had commented that I looked nothing like my family. Every time I felt like an outsider at family gatherings, surrounded by relatives who all seemed to share some invisible thread I couldn't quite grasp. I'd always told myself I was being paranoid, that genetics were random, that not everyone looks like their parents. But some part of me had known. Some deep, buried part of me had always known something was off. The stairwell door opened, and Claire appeared. She didn't say anything, just sat down next to me on the step, close enough that our shoulders touched. We sat like that for a long time, listening to the muffled sounds of the building around us, the distant hum of air conditioning, footsteps on the floor above, a phone ringing somewhere far away. You're still my sister, Claire finally said, her voice thick with tears. Nothing changes that. Everything changes that, I said, and I heard the bitterness in my own voice, sharp and unfamiliar. I'm not who I thought I was. I'm not your real sister. I'm just some kid Mom and Dad took in because they felt sorry for a teenage girl who got pregnant. Don't, Claire said, and there was steel in her voice now. Don't do that. Don't make it ugly. Mom loved you. Dad loved you. I love you. You're my sister. You've always been my sister. But I'm not, I said, turning to look at her. Her face was blotchy and wet, her eyes pleading. I am adopted, Claire. I have a biological mother out there somewhere. Sarah Mitchell. I have a whole other history, a whole other family maybe, and I knew nothing about it. Mom kept it from me my entire life. She was scared, Claire said softly. You read the letter. She was terrified of losing you. So she lied instead, I said, for 29 years. Claire didn't have an answer for that. We sat in silence again, and I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. The grief of losing Mom, which had been overwhelming enough on its own, now mixed with this new grief, this loss of identity, this sudden untethering from everything I thought I knew about myself. Eventually, we went back to Pemberton's office. He was waiting patiently, the folder still open on his desk. We sat down again, and he walked us through the rest of the will. The house would go to both of us, to be sold, and the proceeds split evenly. Mom's savings, her retirement accounts, her life insurance, all divided equally between Claire and me. She'd been fair, scrupulously fair, making sure we each got exactly the same, as if she'd known that this revelation would come, and she wanted to prove that we were equal in her eyes, that adoption didn't make me less of a daughter. But there was one thing that was just for me, the blue hat box and everything in it. Pemberton handed me a key, small and silver, and told me it was for a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Mom had put the hat box there 6 months ago, he said, when she'd updated her will. She wanted to make sure it was safe, that it would get to you. I took the key. It was warm from his hand, and I closed my fist around it, feeling its edges press into my palm. The drive to the bank felt surreal. Claire offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. She understood, or at least she pretended to. We hugged in the parking lot of the law office, holding each other tight while the rain continued to fall around us. And then I got in my car and drove through streets that suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I was seeing them for the first time. First National Bank was downtown, a solid brick building that had been there since before I was born. Before I was adopted, I corrected myself, and the thought sent a fresh wave of disorientation through me. The lobby was cool and quiet, the air conditioning a sharp contrast to the humid heat outside. My clothes were still damp, and I shivered as I approached the desk. The woman who helped me was older, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked at the key I handed her, checked my identification, and led me through a heavy door into the vault. The safety deposit boxes lined the walls, small metal doors with numbers etched into them. She found the right one, inserted her key and then mine, and pulled out a long metal box. She carried it to a small private room, set it on the table, and left me alone with it. I stared at the box for a long time before I opened it. My hands were shaking. Inside was the blue hat box, exactly as I remembered it, round, faded, with a pattern of tiny flowers around the rim. I lifted the lid. Papers. So many papers. My adoption certificate, official and legal, with my name, Jessica Marie Harper, and below it, in smaller print, born to Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. My original birth certificate, the one from the hospital, listing Sarah as my mother and the father as unknown. Medical records from my first few days of life. A bracelet, tiny and pink, with baby girl Mitchell written on it in faded ink. Photographs. I picked up the first photograph with trembling fingers. A girl, young, maybe 16 or 17, with long dark hair and eyes that looked too old for her face. She was sitting on a bed in what looked like a hospital room, holding a bundle wrapped in a white blanket. Me. She was holding me, and she was crying. I could see the tears on her cheeks, the way her mouth was twisted with grief, the way her arms held me so carefully, like I was made of glass. There were more photos. Sarah holding me, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Love, maybe, or loss, or both. Sarah with an older woman who must have been her mother, my biological grandmother, both of them looking exhausted and sad. One photo of just me, wrapped in that white blanket, my eyes closed, my tiny fist curled near my face. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, it said 3 days old. So perfect, so loved. I found letters. 3 of them, written on lined notebook paper, the kind you tear out of a spiral binder. The handwriting was young, loopy and uneven, with words crossed out and rewritten. They were addressed to me. The first one was dated 3 days after I was born. Dear baby girl, it started. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it anyway. I need you to know that I love you. I love you so much it hurts. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm giving you to people who can give you everything I can't. A home, a family, a future. I'm 17 years old, and I'm scared, and I don't know how to be a mother. My mom says I'm doing the right thing, that I'm being brave, but I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm breaking into a million pieces. You're so beautiful. You have the tiniest fingers and the softest hair, and when you look at me, I feel like you can see right into my soul. I wish I could keep you. I wish things were different, but they're not, and I have to let you go. Please be happy. Please have a good life. Please know that I loved you enough to give you away. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sarah, I couldn't see the words any more through my tears. I set the letter down and pressed my hands to my face, trying to breathe, trying to process the weight of what I was reading. This girl, this child really had given me up because she loved me, had held me for 3 days, and then handed me to strangers because she thought it was the right thing to do. And my mother, the woman who raised me, had kept all this hidden, had let me grow up never knowing that somewhere out there was a woman who had made the hardest choice of her life for my sake. The second letter was dated a year later. Dear Jessica, that's what they named you. I found out. Jessica Marie. It's a beautiful name. You're 1 year old now, and I wonder what you look like, if you're walking yet, if you're saying words. I wonder if you're happy. I hope you are. I hope your parents love you the way I couldn't. I'm 18 now, and I'm in college. Community college. But still, I'm trying to make something of myself. Trying to prove that giving you up wasn't for nothing. Some days I'm okay. Some days I can go hours without thinking about you. And then something will happen. I'll see a baby in a stroller or hear a kid laughing, and it all comes back, and I can barely breathe. My therapist says it gets easier. I don't know if I believe her, but I'm trying. I'm trying to move forward. I hope you're doing the same. I hope you're thriving. I love you. I'll always love you. Sarah. The third letter was dated 10 years after that. Dear Jessica, you're 11 now, almost a teenager. I wonder what kind of person you're becoming. Are you smart? Are you funny? Do you like to read? Do you play sports? I got married last year. His name is David, and he's kind, and he knows about you. He knows I gave up a baby when I was 17, and he doesn't judge me for it. We're talking about having kids of our own someday, and I don't know how to feel about that. Part of me is excited. Part of me feels guilty. Like I don't deserve to be a mother after I gave you away. But David says that's not true. He says I made a selfless choice, and that I shouldn't punish myself forever. Maybe he's right. I don't know. I think about you all the time. I wonder if you think about me. If you even know I exist. Your parents, your adoptive parents, they seem like good people. I hope they told you about me. I hope you know that you were wanted, that you were loved, that giving you up was the hardest thing I've ever done. I hope you're happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you. To be happy. I love you, Jessica. I'll always love you. Sarah, that was the last letter. I searched through the rest of the papers, hoping for more, but there was nothing. Just documents, medical records, a copy of the adoption agreement, a note from Mom, written in her handwriting, explaining that Sarah had requested a closed adoption, that she didn't want contact, that she thought it would be easier for everyone that way. But she'd given these letters and photos to the adoption agency, asking them to pass them along to me when I was old enough, if my parents thought it was appropriate. And Mom had kept them, had held on to them for 29 years, waiting for the right time to give them to me, except she'd run out of time. I sat in that small room in the bank vault for over an hour, reading and rereading the letters, studying the photographs, trying to piece together the story of my beginning. Sarah Mitchell, my birth mother, a scared 17-year-old girl who had loved me enough to let me go. And now I was 29, and she was out there somewhere, maybe still married David, maybe with kids of her own, my half-siblings, and she had no idea that I knew about her, that I was holding her letters and crying over her words. I needed to find her. The thought came suddenly, urgently, like a physical need. I needed to know who she was, what had happened to her, if she ever thought about me, if she wanted to meet me. The adoption had been closed, but that was almost 30 years ago. Things were different now. There were databases, DNA tests, social media. If I wanted to find her, I probably could. But did I want to? Did I have the right to disrupt her life? To show up after all these years and force her to confront a past she'd tried to move on from? And what about Mom? The woman who had raised me, who had loved me, who had just died and left me with this impossible secret. Would finding Sarah feel like a betrayal of her memory? I gathered everything back into the hat box, closed the lid, and put it back in the metal box. The woman with the silver hair helped me return it to the vault, and I walked out of the bank into the late afternoon sun. The rain had stopped, and the world smelled clean and fresh, like new beginnings. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to figure out what to do next. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Are you okay? Do you want to come over? We can order pizza and not talk about anything if you want." I smiled despite everything. That was Claire, always trying to take care of me, even when her own world was falling apart. I texted back, "Yeah, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Claire's apartment was small but cozy, filled with plants and books and the kind of comfortable clutter that made a place feel like home. She opened the door before I even knocked, pulled me into a hug, and didn't let go for a long time. We ordered pizza, extra cheese, and sat on her couch with a bottle of wine between us, not talking about Mom or the will or the letters. We watched a stupid comedy on Netflix, the kind that doesn't require any thought, and for a little while, I almost felt normal. But then the movie ended, and the silence crept back in, and Claire turned to me with that look she got when she was about to say something serious. "Did you open a hat box?" she asked quietly. I nodded, took a sip of wine. There were letters. From her. From Sarah, my birth mother. Claire waited, giving me space to continue, or not. I appreciated that about her. She never pushed. She was 17, I said. Just a kid. And she loved me. She wrote these letters about how much she loved me and how hard it was to give me up. And Mom kept them all this time, and I never knew. "What are you going to do?" Claire asked. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to find her, to meet her, to ask her all the questions I have. But part of me is terrified. What if she doesn't want to see me? What if I ruin her life by showing up? What if I find out things I don't want to know? Claire reached over and took my hand. "You don't have to decide right now. You just found out about all of this today. Give yourself time to process." She was right. I knew she was right. But the need to know, to understand, to fill in the missing pieces of my story was overwhelming. I'd spent my whole life thinking I knew who I was, and now I was adrift, untethered, desperate for something solid to hold on to. I stayed at Claire's that night, sleeping in her guest room on sheets that smelled like lavender detergent. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face in that photograph, young and scared and crying. I saw Mom's handwriting on that note, explaining why she kept the secret. I saw my own face in the mirror, searching for traces of Sarah, wondering if we had the same nose, the same chin, the same way of smiling. In the morning, Claire made coffee and scrambled eggs, and we sat at her small kitchen table watching the sun come up to the window. The light was soft and golden, the kind of light that makes everything look gentler than it really is. "I think I'm going to look for her," I said, breaking the silence. "I need to know." Claire nodded slowly, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Okay. Do you want help?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to do this alone, to keep it private, to protect myself from judgment or pity. But another part of me was grateful for the offer, grateful that Claire was still here, still my sister, still willing to stand by me even though everything had changed. "Yeah," I said, "I think I do." We started that afternoon. Claire had a friend who worked in social services, someone who knew about adoption records and how to navigate the system. We called her, explained the situation, and she gave us some advice. "Start with the adoption agency," she said. "They might have updated contact information, or at least be able to tell you if Sarah ever filed a consent to contact form. A lot of birth parents do that, especially as time goes on. They change their minds about the closed adoption, and they let the agency know they're open to being found." The adoption agency was called New Beginnings, and it was still in business, though it had moved locations twice since I was born. I called him on Monday morning, my hands shaking as I dialed the number. A woman answered, her voice professional and warm, and I explained who I was, that I'd been adopted through their agency 29 years ago, that I was looking for information about my birth mother. She put me on hold. The music was soft and instrumental, the kind that's supposed to be soothing, but just made me more anxious. I paced around my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, waiting. When she came back on the line, her voice had changed. Softer, more careful. Ms. Harper, I have your file here. I can confirm that your birth mother's name is Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, and that the adoption was closed at her request. However, I do have some good news. 6 years ago, Sarah filed a consent to contact form with us. She indicated that if you ever reached out, she would be open to communication. My heart stopped, then started again, faster. She wants to meet me? She indicated she would be open to it. The woman said carefully, we have her contact information on file. With your permission, I can reach out to her, let her know you're looking for her, and see if she's still interested in making contact. If she is, we can facilitate an exchange of information, and you can take it from there. Yes, I said, the word coming out in a rush. Yes, please. Please contact her. The woman took my information, my phone number, my email address, and promised to reach out to Sarah within the next few days. I hung up and immediately called Claire. She filed a consent form. I said as soon as she answered. 6 years ago. She wants to meet me. Claire screamed, actually screamed with excitement. Oh my God, Jess. That's amazing. That's incredible. I know, I said, and I was laughing and crying at the same time. I can't believe it. I can't believe this is happening. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, checked my email obsessively, barely slept. Claire came over every evening, bringing food and distractions, trying to keep me from spiraling into anxiety. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on the first ring. Ms. Harper? It was a woman from the agency. I have good news. I spoke with Sarah, and she's very interested in meeting you. She was actually quite emotional when I told her you'd reached out. She gave me permission to share her phone number with you, if you'd like to contact her directly. I grabbed a pen, scribbled the number on the back of an envelope, my handwriting barely legible. Thank you, I said, my voice shaking. Thank you so much. I stared at the number for an hour before I had the courage to call it. My finger hovered over the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could feel in my throat. Finally, I pressed dial. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when someone answered. Hello? A woman's voice, cautious, hopeful. Sarah? I said, and my voice cracked. This is Jessica. Jessica Harper. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, quick and uneven. Oh my God, she said, and she was crying. Oh my God, Jessica. I can't believe it's really you. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her life, about growing up in a small town in Ohio, about getting pregnant at 16 and being terrified, about her parents who had been supportive but overwhelmed, about the decision to give me up and how it had haunted her for years. She told me about David, her husband, who she'd married when she was 25, and about their 2 kids, Emma and Noah, my half-siblings, who were now 12 and 10. She told me she thought about me every single day, wondered what I looked like, what kind of person I'd become if I was happy. I told her about Mom and Dad, about growing up in a loving home, about Claire, about my job as a graphic designer, about the life I'd built. I told her about Mom's death, about the will, about finding the letters and the photographs. I told her I'd read her words over and over, that they'd meant everything to me, that knowing she'd loved me had changed something fundamental in how I saw myself. I want to meet you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. If you want that, if you're ready. I've waited so long for this. I want that too, I said. More than anything. We made plans to meet the following weekend. Halfway between where she lived and where I lived, at a coffee shop in a small town neither of us had been to before. Neutral ground. Safe ground. She sent me a recent photo of herself, and I stared at it for a long time, searching for similarities. She had dark hair like mine, though hers was streaked with gray now. The same brown eyes, the same shape to her face. I could see myself in her, and it was both comforting and strange. The week passed in a blur. I told Claire everything, and she was supportive but worried. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" She asked. "It's a lot, Jess." Meeting her. Finding out you have half-siblings, dealing with all of this while you're still grieving Mom. "I know," I said, "but I need to do this. I need to know where I came from." The coffee shop was called the Riverside Cafe, and it sat on the edge of a small river, surrounded by trees that were just starting to turn gold and red with the first hints of fall. I arrived early, my stomach in knots, and ordered a coffee I didn't drink. I sat by the window, watching the water flow past, trying to calm my racing heart. And then she walked in. I knew it was her immediately, even though she looked older than in the photo, even though she was wearing sunglasses, and her hands were shaking as she pulled open the door. She saw me, and she stopped, and for a moment we just stared at each other across the room. Then she was walking toward me, and I was standing up, and we were hugging, and she was crying, and I was crying, and it felt like something inside me that had been broken for a very long time was finally starting to heal. We sat down, and for a while we couldn't speak. We just looked at each other, taking in reality of this moment, this impossible, miraculous moment. She reached across the table and took my hand, and her touch was warm and real and grounding. "You're so beautiful," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're so much more than I ever imagined." "So are you," I said, and I meant it. We talked for hours. She told me more about her life, about the guilt she'd carried, about the therapy she'd gone through to deal with the trauma of giving me up. She told me about the day she'd filed a consent to contact form, how she'd been terrified and hopeful at the same time, how she'd check with the agency every few months to see if I'd reached out. She told me about telling Emma and Noah about me, how they'd been shocked but excited, how they wanted to meet me too. I told her about Mom, about the woman who had raised me, about how much I loved her and how angry I was that she'd kept this secret. Sarah listened, and when I was done, she said something that surprised me. "She was protecting you," Sarah said gently, "and maybe protecting herself too. Adoption is complicated, Jessica. It's not just about the child. It's about the birth mother and the adoptive parents and all the fear and love and hope and grief that gets tangled up in it. Your mom probably thought she was doing the right thing, and maybe she was. Maybe you needed to grow up feeling secure, feeling like you belonged completely, without the shadow of me hanging over you. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so focused on my own hurt, my own sense of betrayal, that I hadn't considered Mom's perspective. She'd been scared too, scared of losing me, scared of not being enough, scared that if I knew about Sarah, I'd love her less. We exchanged phone numbers, promised to stay in touch, and made plans to meet again soon. When we finally said goodbye, standing in the parking lot as the sun began to set, she hugged me again, holding on tight like she was afraid I might disappear. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank you for loving me enough to let me go." I said back, and I felt her shoulders shake with fresh tears. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. I called Claire from the car, told her about the meeting, about Sarah, about how it felt to finally meet the woman who had given birth to me. Claire listened, asked questions, and I could hear the relief in her voice that it had gone well. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I talked almost every day, sometimes on the phone, sometimes through text, sometimes through video calls where I could see her face and she could see mine. We shared stories, photos, pieces of our lives. She sent me pictures of Emma and Noah, and they were beautiful, with dark hair and bright smiles, and I felt a strange pull in my chest knowing they were my siblings, that we shared blood even if we'd never met. And then one day, Sarah asked if I wanted to come visit, meet David and the kids, see where she lived, spend a weekend getting to know each other in person, not just through screens and phone calls. I said yes before I could overthink it. The drive to Sarah's house took 4 hours, and I spent most of it rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd act, trying to prepare myself for meeting my half-siblings and the man who had married my birth mother. Claire had offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. She'd understood, but I could tell she was worried. Sarah's house was in a quiet suburb, a 2-story colonial with a neat lawn and a swing set in the backyard. I parked on the street, took a deep breath, and walked up the driveway. Before I could knock, the door flew open, and there was Sarah, smiling and nervous, and behind her, 2 kids staring at me with wide, curious eyes. "Jessica," Sarah said, stepping aside to let me in. "Come in, please. This is Emma and Noah." "Hi," I said, suddenly shy. "It's nice to meet you both." Emma, the older one, stepped forward first. She had Sarah's eyes and a confidence that reminded me of Claire at that age. "You're our sister," she said, not a question but a statement. "Mom told us all about you." "Half-sister," Noah corrected, but he was smiling. "Do you like video games?" I laughed, some of the tension easing. "I do, actually." "Cool," he said. "I can show you my setup after dinner." David appeared from the kitchen, tall and kind-looking, with graying hair and an easy smile. He shook my hand, welcomed me, and I could see why Sarah had fallen for him. There was a warmth to him, a steadiness that made me feel safe. Dinner was lasagna, homemade, and we sat around a table like a normal family, passing garlic bread and salad, and talking about everything and nothing. Emma told me about her soccer team. Noah showed me a drawing he'd done of a dragon. David asked about my work, and I found myself relaxing, laughing, enjoying the strange normalcy of it all. After dinner, Sarah and I sat on the back porch while the kids played in the yard. The air was cool, the skies streaked with pink and orange as the sun set. We watched Emma push Noah on the swing, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "This is surreal," I said quietly. "Being here, meeting them, it feels like a dream." "I know," Sarah said. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and you'll be gone again. But you're here. You're really here." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Sarah said something that had clearly been weighing on her. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice careful, "about your biological father." I turned to look at her, my heart suddenly pounding. "You know who he is?" She nodded, her expression pained. "I do." "His name was Michael. Michael Torres. We were both in high school. He was a year older than me, and I thought I was in love with him. When I found out I was pregnant, I told him and he panicked. He wanted me to get an abortion. When I said I couldn't do that, he told me he wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. His parents got involved, threatened my family, said we were trying to trap their son. It was ugly, Jessica. Really ugly. So when I made the adoption plan, I listed the father as unknown. I didn't want him to have any claim to you. I didn't want him anywhere near you. I absorbed this, trying to process it. So he doesn't know about me?" Sarah shook her head. "As far as I know, no. I never told him what happened after you were born. I don't even know where he is now. We lost touch after high school. Do you think I should try to find him?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "That's up to you," she said finally. "But I'll be honest. He didn't want you then, and I don't know if he'd want to know you now. He made his choice a long time ago. You don't owe him anything." She was right. I knew she was right. But still, there was a part of me that wondered. Another missing piece of the puzzle. Another person out there who shared my DNA but knew nothing about me. "I'll think about it," I said. "But not now. This is enough for now." Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. None of us are. I stayed the whole weekend. Slept in their guest room, had breakfast with the family, played video games with Noah, and let Emma teach me some soccer moves in the backyard. It was strange and wonderful and overwhelming all at once. By the time I left on Sunday afternoon, I felt like I'd gained something I hadn't even known I was missing. Not a replacement for the family I'd lost, but in addition, a new branch on a tree I was still learning to map. When I got home, I found Claire waiting for me at my apartment, sitting on the steps with a bag of takeout and a bottle of wine. "I figured you'd need this," she said, holding up the wine. I sat down next to her, exhausted but happy. "You figured right." We went inside, and I told her everything. About Sarah's house, about Emma and Noah, about David, about the conversation about my biological father. Claire listened, asked questions, and when I was done, she said something that surprised me. "I'm glad you found her. I'm glad you have them. But you know you're still my sister, right? Like, my real sister. Not half, not adopted. Just my sister. I know, I said, and I meant it. Nothing about this changes that. Claire, you're stuck with me. She smiled, but there was something else in her eyes. Something I couldn't quite read. What? I asked. She hesitated, then sighed. I've been thinking a lot about Mom. About why she didn't tell you. And I think I understand it now, in a way I didn't before. She was scared, Jess. Scared that if you knew about Sarah, you'd leave. That you'd choose your biological family over us. Over her. I never would have done that, I said. I know, Claire said. But she didn't. And I think that fear, that insecurity, it ate at her. She loved you so much, and she was terrified it wouldn't be enough. I felt tears prick my eyes. I wish she'd told me. I wish she'd trusted me. Me too, Claire said softly. But she's gone and we can't change it. All we can do is move forward. And maybe forgive her for being human. She was right. Mom had made a mistake, a big one, but it had come from a place of love and fear, not malice. And holding on to anger, on to resentment, wouldn't bring her back. It wouldn't change anything. All it would do is poison the memories I had of her, and I didn't want that. Over the next few months, my life settled into a new rhythm. I stayed in touch with Sarah, visited her and the kids once a month, and slowly built a relationship with them. Emma started texting me about school and boys and all the things 12-year-old girls worry about. Noah sent me pictures of his drawings and asked for my opinion on which video games to buy. David and I bonded over a shared love of terrible action movies. It wasn't perfect, and there were awkward moments, times when I didn't know how to act or what to say. But it was real, and it was mine. Claire and I sold Mom's house. It was harder than I expected, walking through those rooms one last time, packing up a lifetime of memories into boxes. We found more photos, more reminders of the life we'd had, the family we'd been. In Mom's closet, behind the space where the blue hat box had been, I found a journal. It was old, the pages yellowed, and it was filled with Mom's handwriting. I sat on the floor of her bedroom and read it. Entries about adopting me, about the first time she held me, about how scared she'd been that I wouldn't bond with her, that I'd somehow know she wasn't my real mother. Entries about watching me grow up, about the joy I brought her, about the guilt she felt for keeping the secret. One entry, written just a few months before she died, said I know I should tell her. I know she deserves to know, but I'm so afraid of losing her. What if she hates me? What if she leaves? I couldn't bear it. I love her too much. I cried reading those words. Cried for Mom, for the fear she'd carried, for the love that had been so tangled up with secrecy. And I cried for myself, for the years we'd lost, for the conversations we'd never have. But I also felt something else. Understanding. Forgiveness. Mom had done the best she could with what she had. She loved me fiercely, completely. And if she'd made mistakes, well, so had I. So did everyone. Claire found me sitting there, surrounded by boxes and memories, the journal open in my lap. She sat down next to me without a word, and we leaned against each other, two sisters who had been through hell and come out the other side, changed but not broken. A year passed, then another. Life moved forward, as it always does. I continued to build my relationship with Sarah and her family. Emma started high school, and I went to her first soccer game, cheering from the stands alongside Sarah and David. Noah discovered a love for art, and I helped him put together a portfolio for a summer program. Sarah and I talked about everything, the big things and the small things, and slowly, carefully, we built something that felt like family. But there was still one missing piece. Michael Torres, my biological father. I'd pushed the thought of him aside for a long time, focusing on the relationships I was building, the family I was getting to know. But the question lingered, a quiet itch I couldn't quite scratch. Who was he? What had become of him? Did he ever think about the girl he'd gotten pregnant in high school, the baby he refused to acknowledge? One night, I was at Claire's apartment, and we were scrolling through social media, looking at old classmates from high school, laughing at how much everyone had changed. And then, on a whim, I typed Michael Torres into the search bar. There were dozens of results, But one caught my eye, a man in his late 40s, living in California, working as a real estate agent. His profile picture showed a handsome man with graying hair and a confident smile. I clicked on his page, scrolled through his photos, pictures of him at the beach, at charity events, with a woman who must have been his wife. And then I saw it, a family photo. Michael, his wife, and 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, all teenagers, all smiling at the camera. I stared at the photo for a long time. These were my half-siblings, too. Kids who had no idea I existed, who had grown up with a father who had walked away from me before I was even born. "Are you going to reach out to him?" Claire asked, looking over my shoulder. "I don't know," I said honestly. Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to tell him I exist, that I turned out okay, that he missed out on knowing me. But another part of me doesn't want to give him the satisfaction. He made his choice. Why should I make it easy for him now? Claire was quiet for a moment. "Maybe it's not about him," she said finally. "Maybe it's about you, about getting closure, about knowing the whole story." She had a point, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Sarah had been right. I didn't owe him anything. And if I decided to reach out, it would be on my terms, in my time. Another year passed. I turned 32. Claire got engaged to a guy named Tom, someone she met at work, and I helped her plan the wedding. Sarah and her family came to the wedding, and it was strange and wonderful to see my 2 families in the same room, talking and laughing and celebrating together. Emma caught the bouquet, and Noah complained about having to wear a tie, and David gave a toast that made everyone cry. At the reception, Sarah pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a small wrapped box. I opened it carefully. Inside was a necklace, delicate and silver, with a small pendant in the shape of a heart. On one side was engraved the date I was born. On the other, the date we'd met at the coffee shop. "I wanted you to have something to remember both days," Sarah said, her eyes shining with tears. "The day you came into this world, and the day you came back into my life." I put it on, and she fastened the clasp, and I felt the weight of it against my chest, a tangible reminder of the journey I'd been on, the family I'd lost and the family I found. "Thank you," I said, hugging her tight, "for everything, for giving me life, for letting me find you, for being brave enough to love me twice." She held me close, and I felt her tears on my shoulder. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." The wedding was beautiful. Claire looked radiant, and Tom looked at her like she was the only person in the world. When they said their vows, I thought about family, about the ties that bind us, the ones we're born with and the ones we choose. I thought about Mom, and how much she would have loved this day, how proud she would have been. And I thought about Sarah, standing across the room, watching me with a smile, and I realized that I was lucky to have been loved by 2 mothers, lucky to have 2 families, lucky to have survived the secrets and the pain and come out the other side whole. After the wedding, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I saw Sarah and her family regularly. Emma graduated high school and went off to college, and I helped her move into her dorm, feeling like a proud older sister. Noah started dating a girl from his art class, and he asked me for advice, which made me laugh because I was hardly an expert. David and Sarah celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, and they invited me to the party, introduced me to their friends as their daughter, and I didn't correct them because, in a way, I was. Claire and Tom bought a house, and I helped them paint the nursery when Claire got pregnant with their first child, a girl. They named her Marie, after Mom, and when I held her for the first time, tiny and perfect and smelling like baby powder, I felt a connection to the past and the future all at once. This little girl was my niece, Mom's granddaughter, and she would grow up knowing her whole story, all the complicated, messy, beautiful parts of it. One day, about 5 years after I'd first found Sarah, I was cleaning out my closet and came across the blue hat box. I hadn't looked at it in a long time, hadn't needed to, but I opened it now, pulled out the letters, the photos, the tiny pink bracelet, and I made a decision. I called Sarah. "Do you remember Michael Torres's parents?" I asked. "Do you know if they're still alive?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think so," she said. "Why?" "I want to reach out to Michael," I said. Not because I need him or because I want anything from him, but because I want him to know I exist. I want him to know that his choice had consequences and that I'm one of them, and I want to do it on my terms. Sarah gave me what information she had. Michael's parents still lived in the same town where she'd grown up, a small place in Ohio. I found their address online and I wrote a letter, not to Michael, but to them, to my biological grandparents. I introduced myself, explained who I was, and told them I wasn't looking for money or a relationship, just acknowledgement. I told them about my life, about the family that had raised me, about Sarah and the family I'd found. And I told them that if Michael ever wanted to know about me, I was open to it, but I wasn't going to chase him. The ball was in his court. I mailed the letter and tried not to think about it. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing. I told myself I didn't care, that I'd done what I needed to do, that closure didn't require a response. But then, 2 months later, I got a letter back. It was from Michael's mother. Her handwriting was shaky, and the letter was short. She said she'd known about me, that Michael had told her about the pregnancy all those years ago, and that she'd always wondered what had happened to me. She said Michael had made a mistake, that he'd been young and scared, and that he'd regretted it for years. She said he was married now, with kids, and that he'd built a good life, but that he'd never forgotten about the baby he'd walked away from. She didn't give me his contact information. She said that was his decision to make. But she thanked me for reaching out, for letting her know I was okay, and she said she'd pass my letter along to him. What he did with it was up to him. I never heard from Michael. Part of me was disappointed, but part of me was relieved. I'd said what I needed to say, and that was enough. I didn't need his validation or his apology. I had a family, 2 families actually, and I was loved and I was whole. Years continued to pass. I watched Emma graduate college and start her career. I watched Noah get accepted into art school. I watched Claire's daughter Marie grow into a curious, bright little girl who asked a million questions and loved to draw, just like her uncle Noah. I watched Sarah and David grow older, their hair grayer, their smiles softer, and I felt grateful every single day that I found them, that they'd welcomed me, that they'd given me a place in their lives. And I thought about Mom. Often, I visited her grave regularly, brought flowers, sat on the grass, and talked to her like she was still there. I told her about Sarah, about Emma and Noah, about the life I was building, and I told her I forgave her, for the secrets, for the fear, for the years of not knowing. I understood now, in a way I hadn't been able to before, that love is complicated, that families are messy, that sometimes people make mistakes because they're trying to protect the people they love. One afternoon, I was at the cemetery, sitting by Mom's headstone when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Jessica? A man's voice, uncertain, nervous. Yes, I said. Who is this? There was a long pause. My name is Michael Torres. I got your letter. Well, my mom gave it to me. I'm sorry it took me so long to call. I didn't know if I should. I didn't know if you want to hear from me. My heart was pounding. I stood up, walked away from Mom's grave, needing space, needing air. I don't know what I want, I said honestly. I wrote that letter years ago. I've moved on. I know, he said, and I don't blame you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not being there. For being a coward. You didn't deserve that. Your mother, Sarah, she didn't deserve that either. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at him, to tell him that sorry was enough, that he'd missed 37 years of my life, and a phone call couldn't fix that. But another part of me, the part that had learned about forgiveness and grace and the complexity of human nature, just felt tired. Why are you calling now? I asked. After all this time? Because I have kids, he said quietly. 3 of them. And I look at them and I think about you, and I wonder what kind of person you became. If you're happy. If you're okay. And I realized I needed to know. I needed to at least try to reach out, even if you told me to go to hell. I'm okay, I said. I had a good life. I was adopted by people who loved me. I found Sarah a few years ago, and we have a relationship now. I have a sister, a niece, a whole family. I don't need you. I know, he said, and his voice cracked. I know you don't. But I needed you to know that I think about you, that I'm sorry, that if I could go back and change things, I would. We talked for a little while longer. He told me about his life, his wife, his kids. He asked about mine, and I gave him the basics, nothing too personal, nothing that would let him in too deep. When we finally hung up, I felt strange. Not angry, not sad, just empty. Like I closed a door I hadn't even realized was still open. I called Sarah that night and told her about the conversation. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "How do you feel?" "I don't know," I admitted. I thought I'd feel something more. Relief, maybe, or anger, but I just feel nothing. Like he's a stranger who happens to share my DNA. "Maybe that's okay," Sarah said gently. "Maybe that's all he needs to be. You don't owe him a relationship, Jessica. You don't owe him anything." She was right, and I realized, sitting there on my couch with the phone pressed to my ear, that I'd already found what I was looking for. I'd found my story, my history, my roots. I'd found Sarah and Emma and Noah and David. I'd made peace with Mom's choices and my own. Michael Torres was just a footnote now, a name in a story that was so much bigger than him. I never spoke to him again. He sent a few emails over the years, updates about his life, photos of his kids, awkward attempts to build a bridge I had no interest in crossing. I responded politely but distantly, and eventually the emails stopped. I heard through his mother, who I exchanged Christmas cards with, that he'd told his kids about me, that they knew they had a half-sister out there somewhere. Maybe one day they'd reach out. Maybe they wouldn't. Either way, I was okay with it. Life continued. Claire had another baby, a boy this time, and they named him James. Sarah and David became grandparents when Emma had a baby girl of her own, and I flew out to California to meet her, this tiny new person who was somehow connected to me through the strange web of biology and choice that made up my family tree. Noah got married to a girl from his art class, and I stood up in a wedding, gave a speech about how proud I was of him, how grateful I was to be his sister. And through it all, I carried Mom with me. Not the perfect, idealized version I created in my grief, but the real woman, flawed, scared, loving, human. I understood now that she'd done the best she could, that her choices had been motivated by love, even if they caused pain. And I forgave her fully and completely, because holding on to anger would have only hurt me. On the 10th anniversary of Mom's death, Claire and I went to the cemetery together. We brought flowers, sat on the grass by her headstone, and talked about her, about the good memories, the funny stories, the ways she'd shaped us into the women we'd become. And we talked about the secret, about how it had changed everything and nothing all at once. "Do you think she'd be happy?" Claire asked. "About you and Sarah? About how everything turned out?" "I think so," I said. "I think she'd be scared at first, worried that I'd replaced her. But I think eventually she'd see that you can't replace people. You can only add to them. Sarah didn't take Mom's place. She just filled in the gaps, helped me understand where I came from. And that doesn't diminish what Mom gave me. It just makes the picture more complete." Claire nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. "I miss her," she said. "Me too," I said. "Every day." We sat there for a long time, two sisters bound by love and loss, and the complicated truth of family. And when we finally stood to leave, I felt lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there, and now it was gone. That night, I pulled out the blue hat box one more time. I looked at the letters, the photos, the tiny pink bracelet, and then I carefully packed it all away, not to forget, but to preserve. This was my history, my beginning, the foundation of who I'd become. But it wasn't my whole story. My story was still being written in the relationships I built, the choices I made, the love I gave and received. I thought about the day I'd sat in that lawyer's office, listening to Mom's letter, feeling like my world was ending. And I realized now that it hadn't been an ending at all. It had been a beginning. The beginning of understanding, of growth, of learning that family isn't just about blood or biology or who raised you. It's about love in all its messy, complicated, beautiful forms. I had been loved by a 17-year-old girl who gave me up because she wanted me to have a better life. I had been loved by a woman who raised me as her own, who kept secrets because she was afraid of losing me. I had been loved by a sister who stood by me through everything, who never let adoption change what we meant to each other. And I had been loved by a family I found later in life, who welcomed me with open arms and made space for me in their hearts. Not everything is what it seems. Sometimes the truth is hidden, buried under layers of fear and love and good intentions. Sometimes the people we think we know best are strangers in ways we never imagined. And sometimes when we finally uncover the truth, it doesn't destroy us. It sets us free. I was adopted. I was chosen. I was loved. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I put the blue hat box back on the shelf in my closet, turned off the light, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I'd call Sarah, make plans to visit. I'd text Emma and Noah, checking on their lives. I'd have lunch with Claire, watch her kids play, and feel grateful for the family I had, in all its forms. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the secrets or the lies or the years of not knowing. Just the love. The love that had carried me through the hardest moments. The love that had brought me home. The love that had made me who I was. And that love, I realized, was more than enough. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, warm and golden. I made coffee, sat on my balcony, and watched the world wake up around me. Birds singing in the trees, neighbors heading off to work, kids laughing as they waited for the school bus. Ordinary moments, ordinary sounds, but they felt precious somehow, like gifts I'd almost missed. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Good morning, sweetheart. Just wanted to say I love you. Hope you have a beautiful day. I smiled, typed back, love you too. Talk later. Another text, this time from Claire. Marie wants to know if Aunt Jess can come over this weekend. She misses you. I replied immediately. Tell her I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it for the world. And then one more text from Emma. Hey, Jess. I'm coming home for Thanksgiving. Can't wait to see you. Maybe we can do that sister shopping trip we talked about? I felt my heart swell. Absolutely. It's a date. I sat there for a long time, phone in hand, feeling the weight of all that love, all those connections. This was my family. Not perfect, not simple, but mine. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Later that day, I went to my desk and pulled out a notebook. I've been thinking about writing down my story, not for publication or for anyone else to read, but for myself, for Marie and James and Emma's baby girl, and any other kids who might come along, so they'd know where they came from, the complicated, messy, beautiful truth of it. So they'd understand that families come in all shapes and sizes, that love is what binds us, not blood. I started writing, and the words flowed easily, like they'd been waiting all this time to be told. I wrote about Mom and Dad, about growing up feeling loved and secure. I wrote about the day the will was read, about finding the blue hat box, about the letters from Sarah. I wrote about meeting her, about Emma and Noah, about building a relationship with the woman who gave birth to me. I wrote about Michael, about the phone call, about choosing to let go of anger and resentment. And I wrote about forgiveness, about understanding, about learning that people are complicated, and that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. When I finished, hours later, my hand was cramped and my eyes were tired. But I felt lighter. I'd told my story, claimed it, made it mine. And in doing so, I'd found a kind of peace I hadn't known I was looking for. That weekend, I went to Claire's house. Marie ran to greet me at the door, throwing her arms around my legs and chattering excitedly about a picture she'd drawn for me. I scooped her up, kissed her cheek, and let her drag me inside to see her masterpiece. It was a drawing of our family, stick figures holding hands. There was Claire and Tom and James. There was me, and there, off to the side, was another group of figures. Sarah and David and Emma and Noah. Who are they? I asked, pointing. That's your other family. Marie said matter-of-factly, Mommy told me you have two families. So I drew them all together. I looked at Claire, who was watching from the doorway with tears in her eyes. That's beautiful, baby, I said to Marie, my voice thick. Thank you. She beamed at me, proud of herself, and ran off to play. Claire came over, put her arm around me. She gets it, Claire said softly. Even at 5 years old, she understands that love doesn't divide. It multiplies. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Maria had drawn what I'd been trying to articulate for years. That family wasn't either or. It was both, and it was all of us, connected by love and choice in the messy, beautiful reality of being human. Thanksgiving came, and for the first time, both of my families were together. Sarah and David and Emma and Noah flew in, and we all gathered at Claire's house for dinner. It was chaotic and loud and perfect. Emma and Claire bonded over stories of me as a kid. Noah and Tom discovered a shared love of bad horror movies. David helped Claire's husband carve the turkey, while Sarah and I set the table, working side by side like we've been doing it for years. When we all sat down to eat, Claire asked everyone to go around and say what they were grateful for. It was corny, but it was tradition, and we all played along. When it was my turn, I looked around the table at all these faces, these people who loved me, and I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. I'm grateful for all of you, I said, my voice shaking, for this family in all its forms, for the love that brought us together and the love that keeps us together, for second chances and new beginnings and the courage to face the truth, even when it's hard. I'm grateful for my mom, who loved me enough to keep me safe, even if she kept secrets. And I'm grateful for Sarah, who loved me enough to let me go, and then loved me enough to let me come back. I'm grateful for Claire, who's been my sister through everything, and for Emma and Noah, who welcomed me into their lives. I'm just grateful for all of it. There wasn't a dry eye at the table. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. Claire did the same from the other side. And in that moment, surrounded by love and turkey and the sound of family, I felt complete.